So the abductees were deemed an additional source of information. We have a lot of hands-on experience with the extraterrestrials, with their technology, with their craft, with their procedures. And a lot of abductees like me, but I'm not alone here, have a lot of memory of that various experiences. Some have lesser memory, some have more. And a lot of people have lived with alien abduction throughout their life and have been through a whole gamut of things in their alien experiences. So we became another source of information. Now, in the UFO community, I want to set straight some ideas about this subject, if I may. I will say, and I in the past had a great deal of respect for researcher Stephen Greer. Okay, I still do in many ways, except for there's some areas he's gotten into that I have less interest in. I'm not alone in the community for saying that. And Dr. Stephen Greer is his own worst enemy in that he has a big ego and he's his own worst enemy in many ways. And many people that have worked with him in the past have quit working with him because he can be difficult that way. Long story short, he can be also opinionated. Okay. He says that he has individuals who have come forward as people, deep level insiders, telling them that they were involved as MILAB perpetrators, that feel that, and he says that these people have claimed that they have perpetrated fake alien abductions at the hands of covert humans. Now, I will say this, Dr. Greer, who I have tremendous respect for, does have his own belief system about there are no negative alien experiences. It's all positive. Therefore, if you have a negative one, it's not ETs, it's humans. Okay, that colors his view quite a bit. The subject matter is much more complex than that. You can't say it's all good. You also can't say it's all bad. It's a mix. In my experiences, my ET experiences over all these years, looking back at them, are positive in my life, okay? The MILAB abductions are difficult, but I understand these are people doing a job, even if I disagree with how they're doing it. I get the motivation.
The GATE program was marketed as a program for smart kids to get ahead of their education. But we now know that there is something much more nefarious going on. If we look at the timeline, it was the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had just launched Sputnik, and suddenly the US is panicking. We weren't just losing the space race, we were losing the intelligence race. The Soviet Union started releasing a bunch of documents where they were pouring millions into psychotronic research, using psychics to peek behind the Iron Curtain. And in response, the CIA launches Project Stargate. They were obsessed with remote viewing and precognition, but they hit a wall. Adults didn't make the best test subjects. Their minds had already been molded by the system, and they were way less likely to access their intuition and achieve altered states of consciousness. And we all know that there's no one more susceptible to psychic phenomena than children. Their brains have higher neuroplasticity, and they haven't been conditioned yet to believe that this stuff is impossible. So the government started pumping money into education so that we could have the next generation of skilled mathematicians and scientists. But that's not really what was going on. The government was faced with a tough question: how can we run large-scale psychic research on children without raising any red flags? And the answer was simple. You market it as beneficial. You call it gifted and talented education. And you make parents co-sign by making them feel like their kids are special. But they weren't looking for your typical A+ student who follows all the rules. They were looking for oddly specific traits. Kids with blue or hazel eyes and no history of broken bones, heightened sensitivity to noise and light. kids with neurodivergence, and high levels of intelligence and creativity. They didn't want the best test subjects. They were looking for the most tuned-in receivers, the kids that could lucid dream, astral project, remote view, and recognize patterns. You weren't expanding your academic opportunities. You were being screened and used as an asset by the government. Go to part 2 where I explain the specific tests they ran, what the data was used for, and how they used mind control and memory suppression to make you forget what you were capable of so that you could be the perfect Mancurian asset.
5 superpowers I've gained living with complex PTSD. Number 1, hyper attunement. I can read people fast, their tone, their energy, and micro expressions, keeping me highly in tune with others. Number 2, radical empathy. I don't just understand pain, I feel it, and because of that, I meet people with understanding and compassion instead of judgment. Number 3, adaptability. I've lived through chaos, so my nervous system learned to pivot fast and develop resourcefulness, which makes me strong in relationships, work, and crisis. Number 4, self-awareness. Healing forced me to really reflect and look within. Now I notice my triggers, patterns, and needs. I understand myself on a level I never could have or did before. Number 5, turning pain into purpose. I've realized that everything I went through wasn't meaningless. It shaped me into someone who can help others and reminds me that even my darkest times can light the way for someone else.
Did you know childhood trauma survivors develop what scientists call supernatural threat detection abilities? Their nervous systems become hyper-vigilant scanning machines, processing social cues at 10 times normal speed. They can read micro-expressions others completely miss, sense mood shifts before they're even visible. Within seconds of meeting someone manipulative, they feel physical discomfort in their body. They detect lies through the smallest body language tells that fly under everyone else's radar. This hypervigilance operates like having X-ray vision into people's true intentions. The nervous system develops these abilities as survival mechanisms in unpredictable environments. But here's the problem. This constant scanning leaves them chronically exhausted. Even worse, when they trust their instincts, others dismiss them as paranoid or overthinking. Their accurate gut feelings get labeled as anxiety or imagination. But research shows trauma survivors are incredibly accurate at threat detection. What others call paranoia is actually a finely tuned protection system. This hypervigilance isn't a weakness. It's a superpower that shields them from manipulation and toxicity.
What if I told you that 97% of people with psychic abilities all have this one thing in common? Yep, it's childhood trauma. And it actually makes sense from a biological and evolutionary standpoint. Historically, our ancestors relied on their intuition to stay alive. They needed to sense threats before they saw them, know where they could find their next meal, and know if a storm was coming. This is called non-local awareness, and it's something that everyone is born with. Scientists did a study where they found the link between non-local awareness or psychic ability was discovered on chromosome 7. People who had little to no psychic ability had a mutation on this chromosome. So the mutation actually suppressed their psychic awareness. But the psychics in the study didn't have that mutation. So what does this have to do with childhood trauma? The people who didn't have the mutation, the people with psychic ability, suffered from moderate to severe childhood trauma. And the people who had the mutation, the ones without psychic ability, had little to no trauma. Meaning that not only are we born with psychic ability, but this can be suppressed later in life if there is not a use for it.
Little do you know that the CIA spent $20 million researching that traumatized people make the best psychics. So there was this classified government program called Project Stargate. The CIA and the US military spent $20 million over 2 decades studying psychics and remote viewers. These are the people who can describe things and see things in locations that they've never ever been. They were able to describe military targets, locate missing people, things they should never be able to see. Shit that should not be possible. And one of the most documented remote viewers in the program was named Joseph McMoneagle. And this guy grew up in a home full of alcoholism and abuse. He actually said that he developed his psychic abilities to protect himself from the abuse that was happening in his home. And this is in the classified records. But the crazy part is it's not just him. There are peer-reviewed studies, like actual public research. And this showed that people who experience childhood abuse and neglect experience much higher rates of psychic abilities. And a study done with the Institute of Noetic Sciences actually measured precognition ability in traumatized adults. And they measured that versus non-traumatized adults. And they found that the traumatized adults performed better. And that's not because the trauma creates the ability, but because it actually preserves it. And here's the part that got me. Grief is trauma. Loss is trauma. And grief is one of the most documented cases for psychic awakening that there actually is. So if you lost somebody and started feeling things or hearing things or knowing things that you shouldn't know, that's not a coincidence. That's your nervous system doing exactly what the fuck it was built to do. I'm trained in trauma-informed care, and I'm a medium, and I think about this a lot because I believe my gifts came from my wounds. And I want to know if yours did too. Drop it in the comments and let me know. In part 2, we're going to talk about what actually happens in your body when this occurs.
How would you know that you're bulletproof unless you were shot? See, some trauma blocks your psychic abilities, and some actually unlock it. Now, if you're close to psychosis, I need you to scroll. This video is not for you. But the reason why some traumas actually start to unlock your gifts might be hidden in your DNA. Document called Blue Planet Project. This document is a collection of the personal notes and scientific diary of a scientist who was contracted with the government to visit multiple crash sites, interrogate captured alien life forms, and analyze all the data that was collected. The investigations were over 33 years, and when he was discovered, he immediately went into hiding based on what he found. What this scientist believes is hidden in certain people's DNA is the metagene factor. The metagene is a biological variant lying dormant in select members of the human race until an instant of extraordinary physical and emotional overstress activates it. See, if you have this gene, a combustion takes place in your DNA because of this biostress and literally alters your genetic code. And where does the catalyst for this power lie? In your pineal gland. And the thing that activates it is adrenaline. I want you to think of the TV show Supercell. If those events didn't happen to those people, that activation, that combustion would have never caused their gifts to come online. That's the same thing with Ninel Kalagina, the Soviet psychic. If it weren't for her having to go into war at 14 and then leaving at 17 with a wound to her abdomen that she needed repeated surgeries for, her gifts were not going to come online because it was after that injury where things started to fly off the shelves when she was mad. And that's why after America saw Ninel, they started to create things like MK Ultra. That was all about fracturing the mind. That was all about inflicting trauma. Why? Because they were trying to make other Ninel. They knew that a certain combination of trauma could unlock something in people. And that's why they began to inflict that pain on people, because they wanted to create other psychics.
You can actually take out of thin air information about something you have absolutely no access to, just using your mind.
I was given the results. The drawings showed the ability of a visual representation that appeared to be better than overhead imagery. In Pat Price's drawings, it was as if it was from inside his brain that the information was coming, not from his eyeballs overhead looking down.
It was obvious to any intelligence organization that if you had an ability to be able to remotely perceive stuff, really remotely, like any place in the world, that could be an extraordinary intelligence source.
The remote viewing program basically ran from the early 70s to the mid-90s.
For more than 20 years, the CIA used psychic abilities operationally and in a top secret program for the U.S. government. You paid for them, you deserve to see them.
CIA had said cease and desist. And people said, this stuff is so intriguing that we got back into the game.
We once found a guy that could see anywhere in the world through his psychic powers. We could show him a picture of any place and he could describe any activity going on there. But he died, and we haven't heard from him since. CIA Director Stansfield Turner, Chicago Tribune, August 1977.
The first series of experiments here at Stanford Research Institute were what the scientists called remote viewing. For example, here is a reenactment of one of the first experiments last year. The subject was a New York artist named Ingo Swann. He was in the room. The experimenters, Drs. Harold Putoff and Russell Targ, were driving away in a car. Their destination was in a sealed envelope. This day it was Palo Alto City Hall. The subject did not know. But back in the room, the subject began sketching and describing where he imagined they might be. Here was the tape recording that he made then.
There must be buildings around, and this would be sort of an area enclosed of some sort, a quadrangle or a quad. And then I sort of felt that there might be a fountain around, but I didn't hear any water in it.
There is a fountain. That day, it was turned off. Back in the room, the subject sketched a pattern he thought was crosswalks coming together in a circle. In fact, the courtyard is paved in this pattern. The courtyard where they were is 2 miles from the room where the subject was.
I have a theory for why so many psychics, why so many witches, warlocks, or just someone related to the supernatural ends up working for the government at any capacity, whether it's military or some other role. And I mean without recruitment, willingly going in. This is all alleged. Do not get me in trouble, TikTok. So a few weeks back, a creator on here went viral because she talks about how she actually is a witch who works for the government. Many people don't know, and since she already talked about it on this app, I'm not going to get in trouble for this. But there are certain organizations that will not recruit for you, even if you are in the military. Why? Because they will send out the message about the program telepathically. So only people who have that ability and it's strong enough to actually understand the message and follow through and talk to the right person that was put in the message and say the right things that were put in the message, then that is the recruitment. My theory of why she signed up and why so many of us do, and I almost did. I almost went into Secret Service almost like 2.5 years ago. I was even talking to a sergeant who was telling me to put my application in. They were going to get me through as soon as possible. Thank God I didn't go through with that. But so many of us are naturally drawn to the military because I believe, and this is all allegedly, stop getting me in trouble, TikTok. I believe just like how there is a message that's being broadcasted if you're in the service so you can go to that program, there's another message that's being broadcasted that only people who have the ability to hear these messages can pick it up, and they naturally then gravitate towards the military. Because the pipeline between psychics and the government, it's too effective. So let me know what you think. Also, I could be completely wrong. This is a theory. So I could just be crazy and talking on the internet. Let me know what you think.
I wanted to know some of your take on the hemi-sync files that the CIA was doing, because they basically was telling the world after they released them in the 90s that consciousness is real and that having psychic intuitive abilities is real and they can be honed and trained.
What they discovered, a couple things. The first thing they discovered is everyone has extrasensory capabilities. Extrasensory powers, telekinesis, psychic ability, the ability to actually move things with your mind. All that stuff is actually a normal part of the human avatar body. The junk DNA, the disconnected DNA, is not really junk. That's part of the thing that has held us back from tapping into some of those original talents and skills and those sensory perceptions that we already had. They also understood that they can also lure you through frequencies through the media. They can transmit subliminal frequencies. At the same time they're doing that, they can make suggestions to the other side of your brain. And now your brain is taking it all in, and now they've just programmed you. That's why I call it programming.
Right.
And now they got robots, us, walking around, and they have these keywords and these triggers that they use in different marketing things and in different signs and in different buildings and movies. And they do experiments on us to trigger us to see what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and which group of people the programming took to the best and didn't.
What's that? Oh, the recently released CIA document talks about paranormal psychic bending abilities with your mind. Tell me more! Yeah, there was one person in particular that the CIA was trying to follow, and he went on showing that he was able to bend spoons with his mind, but people didn't believe it, so they brought him in to do some study. So many of the people gathered around from the CIA and other people such as scientists and things of that nature trying to figure out if this is actually true. He came in super nervous and he didn't know if he was going to be able to do it because there were so many. Eventually, about half an hour went by, people started to leave the room and they thought this was just a hoax. Eventually, enough people left the room where he felt a little more comfortable. He then bent the spoon with his mind. The onlookers said they wanted to touch the spoon. As they grabbed it, they can feel electricity running through the spoon, as well as when they touched that person, it was running through him. They could feel the electricity. They scanned his brain and they saw that it was sending off an electromagnetic wave through his brain. They believe everyone has this ability. They just don't know how to tap into it and cause that electromagnetic pulse so that they can bend things with their mind. Oh, goody.
The CIA once tried to create mind-controlled assassins using children. In the 1950s, a secret program called Monarch began operating in the shadows of MK Ultra. Their goal was terrifying: turn innocent victims into programmable killers. Children were taken to psychiatric hospitals and military bases. There, they endured months of systematic torture. Electroshock therapy fried their minds. Sensory deprivation broke their spirits. Powerful drugs erased their memories. The process was designed to shatter their personalities into fragments. Each fragment could be programmed with different triggers. A simple code word could activate a sleeper agent. They wouldn't even remember what they had done. The program ran for over 20 years. Victims allegedly included celebrities and political figures. When Congress started investigating in the 70s, CIA Director Richard Helms panicked. He ordered the destruction of nearly all MK Ultra files, but some documents survived, and some victims lived to tell their stories. They described years of unimaginable torture, multiple personalities installed through calculated cruelty. The perfect controllable operative had been created through the systematic destruction of human minds.
Do you have any people paid by the CIA who are working for television networks? This, I think, gets into the kind of getting into the details, Mr. Chairman, that I'd like to get into in executive session.
Operation Mockingbird, the top-secret CIA program that ran from the 1950s to the 1970s. The goal of the program was to infiltrate and influence media outlets in order to shape public opinion and spread propaganda. The CIA used a variety of tactics to achieve this goal, including bribing journalists and editors, creating fake news stories, and even establishing entire media organizations as fronts for the agency. One of the most well-known examples of Operation Mockingbird was the CIA's involvement in the creation of the New York Times Foreign News Service. In the 1950s, the CIA recruited foreign journalists and used them to spread propaganda and disseminate information that was favorable to the agency. The New York Times Foreign News Service was funded by the CIA and was used as a platform for the agency to shape global public opinion. Operation Mockingbird was not limited to the New York Times, however. The CIA also had ties to various other media outlets, including CBS, NBC, and Time magazine. These media organizations were used as a platform for the CIA to spread propaganda and manipulate public opinion. In many cases, the CIA even had direct control over the content that was published in these outlets.
Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds, and this is a major function of the CIA. 400 journalists cooperating with the CIA, including some of the biggest names in the business, to consciously introduce the stories into the press. For example, in my war, the Angola War that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. Ironically, it's called covert action inside the CIA. Outside, that means the violent part. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Times, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Times. We had the complicity of the government of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, if you will, to put these false stories into his newspapers.
What are psionic assets?
An individual who's trained in remote viewing, psychic abilities, telekinesis. You think of consciousness as a field. Don't think of it as this superficial woo-woo thing. Like it's literally like the World Wide Web. It's like the internet. It's always there. We can't see it. It's full of information and exciting things, but you have to be able to tap into it. You need something like a Wi-Fi signal to get there. And the Wi-Fi is this process of getting into mindful meditation. How do you do that? How do we heighten intuition? Well, you do it through stress inoculation. You do it through triggering fight or flight. The most powerful things you can do is trigger that on. You gotta hijack the amygdala and boom, you put someone there. So your instincts have to be satisfied at this time. So that just means you have to be comfortable. Satisfy the instinct, suppress the intellect, heighten the intuition, add back in the intellect at a high level, boom, you're in it.
Stargate is
Stargate is a program.
The program by the CIA that was in the 70s, right?
Yep.
Okay.
70s and 80s. And 17 of the 19 intelligence agencies of the United States used the Stargate program. 505 individual missions done over the 17 out of the 19 agencies with Stargate in 20 years. The thing is, the people doing this, the remote viewers, they would never be getting the target. They would never know because it creates a feedback loop. They don't know if they did well.
No way.
Yeah, they because first of all, it's a top secret mission, so you can't be briefed on it, right?
No freaking way.
And so they would do it, and the only way that they knew that it was successful is that this agency came back for a different mission.
No
again
freaking
and again
way.
and again and again. Yeah, because they know that even if you see the target 30 years later, right?
Yeah.
And finally you get to see that remote viewing session you did back in the 70s. Now you've changed it. Now you've created a feedback loop. To where, were you remote viewing the moment you looked at the target in the future? Or were you remote viewing the event? It's very strange because there have been times with Angela Ford, one time they asked her like, hey, okay, here's the target, whatever. She starts drawing like this big drum, sort of like this circle and this and that, and like all these, and she's like, it's a water purification plant. And they're like, sorry, no, it's a water park. They're like, close, you got close to water park. And then she's like, something doesn't sit well with me. They started doing research. Well, 50 years before that water park was there, it was a water purification plant. They pulled up a picture. The picture of the water purification plant matched her remote viewing almost one for one in size and everything. You could almost lay it over. That's how close it was. So now they're thinking, okay, did you go back in time and remote view, or did you go forward in time and see the picture that we pulled up?
Oh my God.
Very strange.
Oh my God.
I spent years trying to heal my hypervigilance, and then I realized it's what makes me a medium. It's the kids that grew up in unsafe or unpredictable environments that learn to read everything. Like the energy when someone walks into a room, that tension before the fight even starts, what someone's face is doing before they actually say anything out loud. So your nervous system became a finely tuned instrument because it literally had to survive. And here's the thing, that same nervous system is what is making you psychically sensitive. Like, hypervigilance is just your threat detection system being in overdrive. You're scanning constantly, you're reading energy, maybe you're picking up on things that other people miss completely. In a traumatic environment, that's exhausting as hell and completely dysregulating. But that same mechanism, that ability to tune into subtle information that other people just naturally tune out, that's not a malfunction, that's the exact same skill set. The difference between a hypervigilant, traumatized person and a psychic medium is not the ability. It's what they do with it, and if they actually have any framework to understand what it is that they're picking up. So no, trauma didn't give you psychic abilities. It basically preserved them. It kept your channel wide open and highly preserved in a way that non-traumatized people just genuinely don't have. So if you've always felt like you knew too much, felt too much, maybe you know things you have no business knowing, it's not that something's wrong with you at all. It's that your nervous system is actually doing something extraordinary. You maybe just never had a name for it. Or you called yourself sensitive or something like that. But the fact is, it's your psychic abilities. If this is you, leave a comment. And if you're a medium with trauma history and you want to understand how this connects in our brains, we do this kind of stuff in the Extra Collective. The link is in my bio for that.
More profound was that CIA was interested in certain humans that may have had an enhancement of this alien DNA. That is to say that basically we're all aliens in some respect. But some of us, some humans, have an enhancement of that alien DNA. And that was the first time I ever heard that. To me, that was the most shocking thing I ever heard of. I didn't know that.
Why were they so interested in the DNA of extraterrestrials and the DNA of humans that may contain extraterrestrials for maybe enhancements? I don't know.
There's a cognizance, I believe, within the intelligence community, particularly CIA, that there are humans among us that might be more extraterrestrial than human. And how do you identify them? That could be a major factor in why they were interested in that. And there's also the, I guess you would call contact tracing of like who's who.
Right.
And so what they did reveal that there was an interest in certain families.
How would you understand families?
I understand families to mean bloodlines.
Right.
That they were interested in certain bloodlines going back to
ancient times.
Who knows, ancient times.
Did they mention other heritages around the planet that through this marker?
I was specifically told that the Cherokee heritage, the Cherokee Nation, had something to do with the phenomenon. And furthermore, that it has something to do with perhaps even the actual existence of Atlantis, that they may have been survivors of Atlantis. But then I can't prove that. I can't divulge a source. I was told by a very credible source.
And what was their take on Atlantis, since we're speaking about it?
I believe that their take is it's an actual, and it's not myth and legend, it's an actual place.
Do they know where it's at?
No.
No.
I don't know where it's at, and they didn't tell me where it's at.
But what would give them that idea that the Cherokee heritage is connected to the Atlantean time, unless they had some sort of DNA to compare it to from Atlantis?
I think because that there's a preponderance of people in the intelligence community and in the military community, especially special operators, who've had these experiences, and when they examine these people and start questioning them about their background, about their family heritages, that it was a preponderance of Cherokee heritage associated with not only having these experiences, but with having implants.
So the suggestion of implants means it's possibly currently ongoing.
Yes, it is, because implants have been recovered from people, not just those who are in the military or intelligence community, but from others.
Well, being in this meeting, John, and listening to the biology and all the tech being, presented to you, and you going through this experience already, your whole life of, these different experiences with ET intelligence, what was going through your mind? What was your emotion?
My feeling was that this was why I had those experiences to begin with, that perhaps I was taken. And I never used the word abducted because I wanted to be taken. I was only disappointed when they brought me back. But perhaps this is why I was taken, that I may have had this lineage in my own family history. What is that purpose? And I didn't know for many, many years. In fact, it wasn't until 2020 that I knew what I was supposed to do.
And what is that?
And that is to do exactly what I'm doing now with you.
Gotcha.
Is to share my story and to share my experiences with others who may have had similar experiences. And so on July of 2020, it was my birthday, there was a CE6 global session, and it was called Harmonic Convergence 2020. My wife and I participated in this global CE6 session, and I just looked up and didn't see anything for a while. And all of a sudden, I saw this bright orb. It was a white, bright orb right in front of me over the mountains. And we were only like 2.5 to 3 miles away from the mountains. So it's above those mountains. My wife saw something simultaneously, but she says, it's over to my right. I said, no, it's right ahead. She was sitting on my right. She should have seen it on her left, but she saw it all the way to her right. And so I looked up, and then the message came to me. And the message was, there are things that you've learned, and it's time for you to share what you know. And that was in reference to their existence, the reality of their existence, and what I learned through my work at CIA. It's time for you to share.
And sharing meaning all the stuff that you've worked with the CIA, or the exposure to, the beings and these visions?
The work was what exposure I had to the reality that there are craft, they're real, and there are beings in these craft. They're here for a purpose, for a reason. And that reason is not so much to warn us of impending doom or anything like that, but to remind us that we're stewards of this planet and that we're doing a terrible job of that.
Do you believe we inherited the planet, or do you believe there was extraterrestrials here way before us that started this?
Well, to answer your question, I believe we are also extraterrestrials. I think we were brought here, and that we forgot our origins, and that some of the beings that are being encountered by humans today have been here a long, long time. And they may have had some input into how we developed, and that they have our best interests in mind, but they're concerned about the stewardship of the planet, that we are doing a terrible job of taking care of their planet and our planet, and that when we explode nuclear weapons in our atmosphere like we did decades ago, it not only affected us, it affected them as well. And so that's why they're so interested in us, especially after what we call the nuclear age dawned upon us, that we now have the means to destroy ourselves.
Right.
And by destroying ourselves, we're also destroying them. I think we're their children, and that they have, like a concerned parent, they want us to grow up, but they're giving us enough leeway to become cosmic adults, if you will. And that once we become cosmic adults, we can then join them in the full knowledge of our true origins and why we're here and what our purpose is. And perhaps we can then join them in becoming a spacefaring planet with them.